Hey, this is the antisocial socialite back at it again. Thanks so much to everyone who is tuning in or will tune in. I hope you're having a good Thursday. And yeah, if you have not subscribed, what are you waiting for, darling? Hit that subscribe button, smash that notification bell. So when I get to running this mouth, baby, you are in the loop. You see the title, you know what time it is. What looks like is becoming a series. Uh, the Widows versus Baby Mama series. This is part three, and this is one of the first, not one of the first videos I wanted to do, but this is a video that I tried to do as a pre recorded piece. But as we go through, you're going to see that it's understandable why it's kind of challenging. I just, this is a big topic, it's a very sensitive topic, and I'm going to just do my best to do it justice. So after I did my femininity video, Femininity with Motherhood, I started to research for the video that I still owe everybody that I said I was going to do and I want to do. And I came across this concept while I was kind of researching for that video, the idea of how childhood sexual abuse, or CSA, impacts a woman's ability to be a parent. And so I started to do a bit of research into this, and I came across a couple of articles, I came across some dissertations, and while I was, perusing these YouTube streets as I frequently do, I came across this video by Iyanla Saved My Life. I'm not really sure how it goes, but this one is called Fix My Broken Mom. And the breakdown of the story is a woman has two daughters, and the two daughters contact Iyanla because they have an issue with their mother. So I'm going to play the video. Hopefully I'm going to get out of here so you guys are not here for too long. I'm striving for an hour and a half or less. It is going to take some time because there's a video to watch. There's a number of articles I'm going to cite and read from, some terms we're going to define. We're going to relate that back to the Black community, and then hopefully just quickly throw out some ideas how we can move forward, things that we can discuss in the future. And if it does get too intense or people get tired, if people come through, we can also take a break. So the first thing I'm going to do is play some of the video, and I'm going to try and also skim through some of it because it's actually about 45 minutes long, and there's no need to play all of it. For the most part, I'm not going to show the video, obviously for copyright reasons, but you can hear the audio and I'll let you guys have a little look.
Two sisters wrote me. They are desperate to repair the broken relationship with their mother. It is hard to be a woman and to have a broken relationship with your mother because your mother really gives you your identity as a woman.
I feel like now I have a sense of brokenness because my mom didn't protect me.
Kim is a 33-year-old mother of two. She and her husband Joe have made their home here in Birmingham.
I've tried to mend the relationship, and those have all been my efforts.
Kim's sister Annette is 31 and single. She's coming in today from her hometown of Baltimore.
Life is short, and it's not God's will for my life to be bitter towards my mom.
Kim
But
and
you
Annette
are.
say that when they were little girls, their mom Charlene
Translation, I am though.
controlling and abusive men, and they paid the price. They say one of those men physically abused and emotionally neglected them. They say their deepest hurt is that their mother knew and did nothing.
We were starved. I was locked in rooms. I was forced to use drugs. It was horrible. As a mother, I still do not grasp the understanding of how you can trade your child for a man. I can't get past that.
Almost 2 decades later, and after many bad choices, their mother is broke and depending on the daughters she emotionally abandoned to provide for her.
It went from cell phone bills to can you get a loan for me to can you put the cable bill in your name, ultimately providing for her.
1 year ago, Charlene moved in with Kim and her family here in Birmingham. With her unhealed wounds and many unanswered questions, Kim is forced to face and deal with her mother every day.
So now that my mom is living with me, I feel like the issues that I tried to bury have resurfaced.
If this doesn't get fixed, Kim and Danette say they will cut all ties with their mother, Charlene.
I am very nervous, very anxious. My biggest fear is that at the end of this process, nothing changes and we're still where we were today.
We are all going to meet up at Kim's house. It will be the first time they've all been together in more than 3 months.
Wait for it. Oh no.
I'm here to get to the heart of what's going on. My grandmother told me that you never go any place barefaced and empty-handed. You have to bring goodies. You all look so young. Thank you. How are you? And you are? I'm Charlene. Charlene. I'm the mom. Nice young mom. Thank you. I love it. Nice to meet you. Hi, so thank you for having me in your home. Thank you for coming. Okay. I think one of the most important relationships we have is the relationship we have with our mother. What has kept you together, as dysfunctional or hurtful or harmful as it has been, is the love that you have for each other. Don't underestimate that. People you don't love can't hurt you. Wow. I got a present for you.
Someone brings the worst present you could ever imagine in your whole life.
Now, one would not think that a honey bun would bring people to tears. For years, Kim and Annette were denied physical and emotional nourishment. One of Charlene's ex-boyfriends fed them a constant diet of canned goods and packaged sweets. The basket I brought is filled with sobering reminders and childhood memories.
There were 3 honey buns left on the table. And my mom's ex wasn't there. And I asked her if I could have a honey bun. And she said, yeah. So I ate the honey bun, went on about my business. He comes home and says, what happened to a honey bun? There was 3 left on the table. And I said, oh, my mom said I could have one. She was like, no, I didn't. And she let him beat me. Because she made him think that I ate the honey bun without permission. And didn't think twice about it.
How do you remember? I mean, I can't remember back that far. And I'm not going to lie and say I didn't say it. And I probably did say it in that moment. Yeah, how many years ago was that?
About 22, maybe 23.
22 years.
I remember like it was yesterday.
How does that serve you?
Whenever I tell the story, no matter how many times I get emotional, you chose him. And I can't think of a time where you put us first. Always a sacrifice. And who sacrifices their kids for love, affection, sex, whatever you think a man can give? And the hard part is they're all long gone. But we're still here. She depended on us. But she doesn't have anybody else.
You are attached to the details. I'm not. Okay. So there will come moments when you do not like
getting paid to be
So
on
when
the
I
show, they have to
challenge
bid
you,
in.
know that we're going deeper. Are you in? Are you in? All the way? Okay.
Come on.
I want to talk to both of the daughters separately to examine the roots of their anger toward their mother. Once I'm clear, then I'll talk to their mother. I begin with Kim. When does she stop being a mother and just be a woman in your mind?
The relationship where we were put in a home where that was abusive.
Is that where the heartbreak started?
Yes.
So, I want to hear about it. For every heartbreak, I want to pivot. And I want you to go right back there.
Okay. My mom's first relationship was with my sister's dad. And I was led to believe that he was my father.
Here we go.
And he was, in my eyes, until he moved away. And when that happened, I no longer had a father figure in my life.
Okay.
What was the
So I don't know how I'm going to do this because I'm playing a video, I'm reading some text, and I'm also trying to talk. And you're going to see hopefully at the end how all of this comes together. Okay. So you have a woman who has 2 daughters, and she chooses her men over her daughters. So we already have a huge problem here in that the mother lied to one of the children for a long period of time and told her that this man is your father. Now, I don't know why the father left, but there's a possibility that when he found out that one of the children was not his, that, you know, I think this one is the older one. I should have paid more attention. If this one, the one speaking, is the older one, then the man knew that this was not his child. But for whatever reason, the mother decided to actually not tell the first child, I think it is, that this man is not her father. So after she's become attached to this man and he's the consistent figure in her life, one day he walks out. So this is an abandonment issue. And, let's just put all the cards on the table. This is the decision the mother made. Okay? Now, I'm not going to drag her over the coals, but we have to say that this was the choice she made. And I can't play the whole video because it's probably too long for everybody, but there's already a huge problem here that you have a woman who lied to her child about the identity of her father for a significant period of time. And one day that man just walked out, not just on his own child, but on this other child as well. Okay? So we've got a history of poor decision making. So when you hear guys talking about why do we have criticisms of single mothers, regardless of the mother's background, this is where it's kind of like, do we blame? Do we not blame? Do we criticize? Do we not criticize? It's sticky. Okay, so the mother lives with this daughter.
That's hard for any girl. At the age of 33, Kim says she still has no idea who her real father is.
So there's abandonment issues.
Then she meets another man.
But kudos to her because she got married.
At that point, I started seeing the separation from her being a mother to her being focused on men.
Okay. New man, what happened?
He would beat me. He would tell her to beat.
Wait a minute. Hold up. Hold the phone, Jesus. You're telling me that your mother brought a man into your home who would tell her to beat you,
That's
and
sad.
she would do it. What does that feel like?
It was the most devastating feeling inside of me today. He beat you. And you knew he did the same thing to us. My resentment is so strong that I have hatred towards you. Who wants to say they hate their mother? Give me a pen.
So, for those who missed the very beginning, Iyanla said, the relationship a female has with her mother is so crucial because a woman derives her identity from her mother. So imagine being a daughter, but you hate your own mother. How is that going to impact how you see yourself? So I've seen this quite a few times, but every time I get to this bit, I actually get quite teary. And this is why it boggles the mind when you have these female YouTubers who say things like the absent father is more influential than the one who's present. Because how do you work that out when you look at the devastation that it causes? But it's sad. It's a sad state of affairs. Okay.
Dig deep, tell why. I hate my mother because
she abandoned me. I hate my mother because she's living in my house.
Yeah.
And now she only has me to depend on.
And I have to do for her what she didn't do for me.
I have to do for her what she damn sure didn't do for me.
Yeah.
I don't want my mother in my house around my children.
Yeah. She never told me who my daddy was.
Never told me who my father was.
And I still don't know.
And I still don't know.
And what does a little girl feel like when she doesn't even know who her daddy is?
Incomplete.
What does a grown woman feel like, beloved, when she doesn't know who her daddy is?
I don't know who I am.
Okay.
I hate my mother for that.
Cool. So now we're going to fast forward to the other daughter.
Toward their mother, Charlene.
I can't think of a time where she chose Kim and I and put us first.
They say that for years she allowed one of her boyfriends to control her and abuse them.
We were starved. I was locked in rooms. I was tormented. I was forced to use drugs.
All of Charlene's relationships with men have failed, and now she's alone and living with Kim and her family. And Kim says the issues she tried to bury long ago have resurfaced.
I had to do for her what she damn sure didn't do for me.
So when you have these females saying, oh, you know, why are you talking about dying alone? Technically, we'll all die alone. There's dying alone and there's dying lonely.
Body image issues and her relationships with men. Now she's alone and living with Kim and her family. And Kim says the issues she tried to bury long ago have resurfaced.
I had to do for her what she damn sure didn't do for me.
Now, I'm meeting with Kim's sister, Annette. Annette is single and lives in Baltimore. She has struggled for years with body image issues and her relationships with men. She blames
so
her
basically,
issues on her mom.
It's not generational curses, it's generational carelessness. So when we see a prevalence of obesity, women who can't bond with men, blah, 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 this is the reason why. Okay, so Anna gets the cushion out again and she wants her to label the hurts.
It just wasn't fair. That my mom let somebody come in our house and tell her how to raise her kids. Whoever she is with, that's the personality she takes over. So she becomes a piece of them. And that shows up in just her
So remember that
If that's how you want me to treat my
she
kids,
loved the
then
men
guess
more.
what? The door.
I wish that she was stronger.
I don't like her for what she allowed to happen. Come on. I don't like her. She just let me be timid. Yeah. Oh.
Okay. So that's the second daughter.
Annette's pain is deep. In fact, it goes all the way back to her mother's womb. I want you to come here for a minute for me. Draw your knees up to your chest. Yeah. Lay down. Just lay down. You know what that is? That's called a fetal position. It takes you back to a time when you were safe. So when you wake up every day with all of those memories locked in this body, are you safe in your body today? No, you're not safe in your body today.
Okay.
That's okay, baby. Just let it up. Just let it up. Yeah.
I always want to be smarter. I always want to be, always thinking about gaining weight and just always wondering about being like a big girl again and just not being comfortable in my own skin.
Okay. So let's go forward now.
I'm getting ready to go meet your mom. Thank you,
Let's
ladies.
go
Let me
forward a
take
little
my
bit.
extra pins, and my heart has to come along with me, but I'm going to handle it very, very delicately. Okay? Toodles! Hi, Mom.
So this is the crux of the matter now.
Oh, Miss Charlene. Hi, how are you? Why would a mother choose to be with an abusive man at the expense of her daughter's well-being? I suspect that Charlene has an unconfessed truth, and I want to find out what it is. How would you characterize the relationship with your baby girls? It's a distance between us. Why? I think it's because of the hurts that's there, the pains that we both have been through, and we're not communicating about them. We're keeping them in. Where did we learn that? I think I've learned it just growing up as a child. They learned how to act like nothing was going on.
Mm-hmm.
Did you teach your girls to act like nothing was going on? I don't think I did intentionally. But did you? I probably did.
Okay. So the mother says, I taught my daughters to respond to stress and trauma the way I learned to respond to stress and trauma. And that's basically to pretend like nothing's going on. And this is why in the Black community we have so many issues, because we have a stigma or there's shame and guilt attached to actually addressing certain problems. Instead of talking about them, addressing them, getting help, a lot of the times Black people just sweep things under the rug as if it's going to go away.
What's your secret? My secret is I was also sexually abused by a close family friend. Having been raped as a young girl, what did you make up in your mind that made it okay for you to leave your baby girl with Boo Boo to climb? How old were you? I would say maybe about 8, 9, somewhere along there. And you held on to that all this time. Yeah, I did. I was ashamed, and I didn't feel protected. I just felt so alone. And I didn't have anybody there to help me, to protect me. And it just took so much out of me. And I just didn't really know how to deal with it. This is the first time that Charlene has ever revealed that she was sexually molested as a child. To truly understand a daughter's pain, a mother must first get in touch with her own issues.
Okay, so
I think sometimes people are careless with little girls' hearts. Who is careless with your heart? A mother.
okay.
Then an alcoholic. And who else? Well, I would say my father truly wasn't there because I didn't know who he was.
about the man that violated you? Did he pierce your heart?
Yeah, he did.
It's funny that out of the three people she named first, the first person she picked was the mother.
17 going on 18. Is he Kim's dad? No, I don't think so. Do you know who Kim's father is?
No.
When you look at her and realize, I don't even know who your father is. What do you do with that? What was going on in your heart, baby? I just think that it was just empty inside because I just felt dead. I want to hear you phone that I slept with so many men. I don't even know who my daughter's father is. I slept with multiple men and I don't know who my daughter's father is.
No, I didn't like that bit. Just because she was having sex with more than one person doesn't mean to say it was like 100. But she tried to frame it that way, and that bit I didn't really like. Okay, so I'm glad that she clarified it wasn't a good thing, but it wasn't the way Iyanla or Iyanla, or however you say her name, presented it. Okay, but still, we can see that there's a pattern forming.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I'm so ashamed. Yes, my sister, yes. It's a pain that's been inside of me for a long time. Yes. And it's just such a relief to finally say it out loud. When you look at your face and know, I've slept with so many men looking for my daddy that I don't even know who my daughter's father is. Huge. Big. Okay, so I'm just going to go right there. Having been raped as a young girl, what did you make up in your mind that made it okay for you to leave your baby girl with Boo-Boo the Clown? I just didn't think that. It never dawned on you that he could be emotionally, mentally violating these girls? Did you know? Not in a sense where I saw it. Are you aware that he physically abused them? Put his hands on them? Because he beat you. What were you looking for? What were you going for? What were you missing that rendered you deaf, dumb, and blind to the safety of your baby girl? Because I think I was loved at that time. So do you get that to fill your void, you sacrificed your daughter? You get that? Yes.
Yeah.
In the same way that I was sacrificed as a little kid. But did?
Okay. All right. So we have heard the testimony and the example of this family. So what I'm going to do now, we're going to go through some information that I came across while I was looking for information on this video, because what we can see here is there's a pattern, and that's what Iyanla actually goes on to say afterwards, that there is a pattern here of familial neglect and abuse. And as a result of the neglect and abuse, it's passed on generationally. Okay. Let's see if I can find the one I want. There we go. Hopefully everybody can see this. Okay, So we're just going to read through. Some of these are dissertations, they're studies. Not all of them are like peer reviewed or whatever, but there is still some good information in there. So you can see from the title, it's the impact of child sex abuse on parenting, a female's perspective. And I'm just going to enlarge it, and hopefully I'm not gonna, make you read, but we're just gonna follow along quickly. Okay. So, childhood sexual abuse, CSA, is a significant family health risk for women and their children due to the intergenerational aspect of this trauma and the immediate and long term disruption it can cause in the mother child relationship. Duncan, this is the person who wrote the article and did the study in 2004. Studies reviewed from the past 20 years estimated that 1 in 3 women are reported to have been sexually abused as children. These estimates translate into 25.4 million women between the ages of 20 to 59. So they asked women between the age of 20 to 59, how many of you were sexually abused? And they found it looks at around 25.5 million women say that sometime during their childhood, under the age of 18, they experienced some form of sexual abuse. Colsney and Foley reported that 35% to 75% of females seeking mental health services reported some form of sexual abuse trauma. In addition, women frequently report multiple childhood sexual abuse traumas by different perpetrators that led to future pathways of violence spanning the woman's lifetime and that of her children. Both the prevalence rates of CSAT and the associated health risks to women require that interventions to assist and support mothers in their parenting are needed and offered within a framework of bringing recovery and treatment programs for past childhood sexual abuse trauma into the mainstream of women's health care. The proposed outcomes of the intervention of this type are that women will lead healthier lives because of the emotional, physical, and developmental effects of CSAT. To the effects to diminish. The disruption of the woman's relationships caused by the child abuse trauma can be addressed, thereby decreasing the likelihood of attachment disorder between mother and child and improving a woman's ability to parent. It stands to reason that a mother is more likely to keep her child safe from sexual abuse and other forms of maltreatment when her own sense of safety is restored and the connection to her child is established emotionally within the mother child relationship. Along with further CSAT, along with its multiple and prolonged effects, will be prevented from continuing to the next generation of children and parents. No, I can't read. Okay. So, what is that saying? If you don't address women who have been victims of sexual abuse and help them to get through the trauma, the chances are the trauma will go into the next generation. So, what are the effects of childhood abuse? Or what is the impact of abuse in general? Because it's not just about sexual abuse, there are other forms of abuse that are working. So it's going to be a lot of reading. It's going to be hopefully not too much reading. Ooh. So the consequences of experiencing child abuse and neglect will vary considerably. For some adults, the effects of child abuse and neglect are chronic and debilitating. Other adults have less adverse outcomes despite their histories. Critical factors that may influence the way child abuse and neglect affects adults include the frequency and duration of maltreatment, and if more than one type of maltreatment has occurred. Chronic maltreatment is defined as recurrent incidences of maltreatment over prolonged periods of time, and has been linked to worse outcomes than transitory or isolated incidences of maltreatment. So when you have an environment that is full of abuse, the abuse neglect is consistent, that is going to over time impact your ability as an adult to function in a healthy way. Research suggests that maltreatment types are interrelated. That is, a large proportion of adults who experience childhood abuse or neglect are exposed to more than one type of known abuse, known as multi type maltreatment. Further to this, other forms of victimization, known as polyvictimization, such as bullying or assault by peers, have often been found to co occur with child maltreatment. Research indicates that those who experience multi-type maltreatment and polyvictimization are more likely to experience high levels of trauma symptoms and worse outcomes as adults than those who are exposed to no maltreatment or only one type. So, what does this mean when we talk about one type of treatment? There's something known as ACEs, and ACEs stands for Adverse Childhood Experiences. So, when you are a child and you are going through a variety of experiences, they can be good or bad, and they are going to shape how you develop as a human being. That is not the one I want. I've got so many tabs open. Let me just check. This I'm going to get to in a minute, but let's first define what ACEs actually are. Because ACEs are categorized into three groups. And let's see. Okay. Let's have a look. What are ACEs? I think it's this one. Okay, okay. So the truth about ACEs are adverse childhood experiences, and they can be categorized as abuse, which is inflicting harm upon a child, neglect, which is withholding something that a child needs from the child, or it can be household dysfunction. So when we look at the Black community and we think about a lot of the issues that Black children face in the home and outside of the home, things like systematic um, racism, poverty, abuse, and neglect, it becomes very obvious why a lot of Black people, especially Black men, are failing, because a lot of support systems have been put in place to support women who are victims of various forms of abuse. But in a lot of instances, men do not report abuse and they often fall through the cracks. I saw a video recently and it said that even men who come from wealthy backgrounds, in many instances, they fail to be successful. And the reason for this is simply this: even a Black man who is qualified to do a particular job, if he goes for a certain position, chances are he's going to be discriminated against, which is going to limit his opportunities. So when you factor in these things, physical, emotional, or sexual abuse, of physical or emotional neglect, and also things like dealing with parents who have mental health problems. Maybe you come from a dysfunctional background where you already have people in your family who are incarcerated. As a child, you're witnessing domestic violence. There's substance abuse in your household and in your environment, and there's divorce, family instability like breakdowns or fatherlessness. That is going to increase the chances of you ending up getting into problems or at least not having a fulfilling life. So it says here around 28% of abuse is physical, 20% is sexual, and 10% is emotional. But obviously, there's all kinds of overlap there as well. Emotional neglect is 14%, just under 15%, and physical neglect, i.e., not providing the basic needs that a child has physically, is basically 10% of neglect. And then when it comes onto things like substance abuse, parental divorce, mental health problems, um, violence against the mother, and incarcerated members of family, you can see how it plays out. So this woman said her mother was an alcoholic. And I'm not sure if she says it later on, but I personally suspect that she had the mother's mother was actually abused in some way as well. And so there's a history of neglect and abuse. And as a result of the what would be the grandmother not addressing her own mental health problems, substance abuse issues, she also had a child and the father was not present in the child's life. And history has repeated itself with the daughter. Now, for one of this woman's daughters, she managed to get married and she has stability. But the other daughter is clearly traumatized because she internalized everything, and then she began to comfort eat and do a variety of things that were self harming. And so her confidence is probably too low, maybe to date, and things like this. So we can see that when these issues go unchecked and unaddressed, when women don't talk about these things, when women don't hold each other accountable, this is how we talk about generational curses, but really it's generational carelessness. Okay, so the possible risk factors are lack of physical activity, people take up smoking, alcoholism, drug use, and then, they start missing work. The more of these ACEs that you have, the more you are likely to exhibit these kind of behaviors. So when we look at the situation with this family, you can see that unfortunately a lot of the issues have not been addressed. And because they haven't been addressed, it's causing pain from one generation to the next, which is what this original article wanted to discuss. How can we help women who've been victims of sexual abuse so that they feel equipped to actually care for their own children? So, what impact does childhood sexual abuse have on people who have been victims? This article, it says parenting can be an incredibly overwhelming and confusing experience for anyone, let alone if you are a survivor of CSA. A past history of CSA does not mean that an individual shouldn't be a future parent, nor does it mean that they are destined to abuse their children. Many individuals with a history of CSA have healthy, loving families of their own, with children who are thriving. However, for the long-term effects of CSA, some of the long-term effects of CSA may make some aspects of parenting difficult to handle. And as a result of trauma, people can experience PTSD. PTSD is not something that is limited just to people who have been to war. Any kind of traumatic experience can cause a person to experience PTSD. Symptoms include reliving experience, avoiding places that are a reminder of the CSA, trouble sleeping or eating, and many more. PTSD can be chronic or it can last a short time. PTSD symptoms can be frightening and life altering by interfering with their ability to enjoy their normal activities, go to work or school, or live daily lives. So some of the symptoms include re-experiencing the symptoms, including nightmares, frightening thoughts or flashbacks of the trauma. Avoidance includes avoiding places, people, or things that remind you of the trauma. This can include certain emotions or thoughts that are related to the trauma. So At the age where you are traumatized, you may have trouble bonding with your own child at that age, because something happens when the child gets to that age where you feel anxiety. Like when I was, well, this lady said she was about 8 or 9. So maybe when her own daughters became 8 and 9, she kind of started to think, oh, any minute now something bad is going to happen to them, because this is the age at which I experienced something negative. And that fear can cause that parent to operate in a variety of different ways. Sometimes they shut down emotionally because they don't want to face what happened to them in the past. So, by shutting down their own emotions to avoid dealing with their own trauma, they become emotionally unavailable to their own children. So, when we go back to the ACEs, one of them was emotional neglect. Because they have begun to shut down, on a day to day basis emotionally, they become disconnected from the needs of their own children. So it says here arousal and reactive symptoms. These include having outbursts of anger, trouble sleeping, startling easily, or feeling tense. And then you have cognition and mood symptoms. Some of these include loss of interest in hobbies, feelings of guilt or blame, trouble remembering details of traumatic events, or negative thoughts about themselves. So, when you are a victim of sexual abuse, or when you are under any kind of abuse, you are going to experience a state of mind which is highly stressful. And what has been discovered is when people are, or when children in particular, are under various forms of stress, it can actually impact the development of the structure of their brain. People think that, people underestimate how detrimental stress is for young people. And for children, it can actually hinder the growth of their brain. So, when we talked about things like single mothers and how a lot of children who grow up in single parent households, they go through anxiety because maybe there isn't enough food, there isn't enough, there aren't enough resources. Maybe there's abuse. The mother is frustrated with the child because the child reminds them of the father or the parent who is not there. There is evidence to show that when young children are highly stressed, their brain cells do not develop. What actually happens in the brain of a child who is stressed is that instead of cognitive thoughts and feelings and emotions that are healthy persist, the brain gets locked in a cycle of fight or flight. What often happens to people or children as they're going through stress is they can no longer process anything that's happening in the real world, because they're constantly frightened, they're constantly just trying to survive. And if you're in an environment where abuse is common, neglect is a daily occurrence, and it says here that children who have abuse in the home often experience abuse outside of the home. That's going to happen in part because, for example, if you are being neglected in your home, what is your personal hygiene going to be like? What are you going to look like in terms of grooming? What are you going to look like in terms of your clothes or your equipment? So, the neglect that you experience in the home is going to open you up to bullying outside of the home. And so, hey, so we're talking about the impact of stress on a child's brain. Okay. So for children who are healthy and in a stress free environment, neural pathways are developing normally. But in the brain of a child that is stressed, the ability for their brain to actually grow is hindered. So as I said, we're going through a lot of different things. I'm just going to try and run through them quickly. People underestimate how significant, I've said it so many times before, how significant trauma is on children. And so when I hear people talking about the impact of fatherlessness, but then trying to insinuate that the problem is really the fact that the father's not around, it's quite frustrating because the child is always going to be more influenced by the parent that they live with. And so I'm just going to run into black demographics, and we're going to talk about, before we talked in the first video about the concept of poverty. How does poverty impact children in America? Okay, because the statistics are from a variety of different places, but we're talking about issues with Western culture. Okay, so this is black demographics. It says here, according to the US Census Bureau ACS study, 23% of all African American men, women, and children live below the poverty line, compared to just 13% of all Americans. At an even higher percentage, 33% of black children live in poverty, compared to 18% of all children in America. The poverty rate of working age African Americans is just under 20%. It's just under ages. What? The poverty rate for working age African Americans is just under 20%, ages between 18 to 64. Poverty rates for black families vary based on family type. You know, we've got some people in this black sector, they really are like, it's the man, it's the man, it's the man. Okay? Poverty rates for black families vary based on the family type. While just under 19% of all black families live below the poverty line, only 7% of black married couples live in poverty, which is considerably lower than the 31% of black families headed by single women. The highest poverty rates, 39% for black families with children, are headed by black single women. Okay, so this is significant considering more than half, 55% of all black families with children, are headed by single women. So when we talk about the impact of poverty, when we talk about the impact of fatherlessness and why it's important to choose better, it's because of this. Children who are raised by single women just tend to be in poverty. And this is one of the stressors that can impact them directly through their ability to eat properly, have stimulation, extracurricular activities, but also it puts stress on them, which impairs the development of their brain, increases the chance of them experiencing bullying and other kinds of victimization. Okay, so percent of families in poverty, 18.5%. Married with couples, 6.7%. Couples with children, 8.7%. Women with no spouse, 30.6%, and with children, nearly 40%. And when you compare that to all people in the States, you can see that no matter the category, black people fare worse compared to the national percentage. So, history of poverty of black American families. The US Census Bureau records historical poverty data among American families using the current population survey and annual social and economic supplements. In 1967, about one-third of all black families lived below the poverty level, compared to only 11% of all families in America. That's due to systematic racism. By 1990, the disparity gap between the two remained virtually the same, despite the slight decrease in overall poverty rates for both populations. During the decades of the 90s, while the nation was experiencing an economic boom, the poverty rate of black families dropped from 29% in 1990 to 19% in 2000, virtually cutting the disparity in half. The economic downturn, however, in the decade of 2000 to 2010 caused an increase in black family poverty to reach 24%. Since 2010, the black family poverty rate began to decrease slightly, reaching 23% in 2014. However, the disparity has remained relatively unchanged since 2000. So as we can see, we know that it's systematic racism. We know that there are opportunities that are not afforded to black people, especially black men. So if people who are married tend to have better income and better outcomes, then obviously by not giving opportunities to men, you sabotage the whole community. But on the flip side, if women are not getting married does help to reduce poverty, because even if you're both on a low income, even if you're both making just minimum wage, the chances of you being in poverty just because you live in one house with two incomes is already going to drastically reduce the number of people in the black community living in poverty. So, living at or below poverty level, female households with no husband, whether they have children or not, 1,401,342. Married couples, 305. And male householders with no wife, I'm assuming that is maybe young men or homeless men. And then the next one, living above the poverty line, more than half are married black people. And even the ones who are above, who are female with no husband, the question becomes how much of that is through assistance. And that's why they go on to talk about how public assistance is something that percentage per percentage, black versus non-black. Black people by percentage use more welfare assistance, even though the number of black people claiming is less, just because the percentage of black people in the society is lower. But in terms of what percentage of black people actually um, use welfare, it's actually higher in the black community. Okay, so let's go back to this idea of childhood trauma. All these things play a role in why the black community is in problems. And it's not just the woman's fault. We know there's institutional racism. We know that there are a number of things that are being used against black people. But at the end of the day, family is the core and the heart of a community. This is not the image I wanted, but I've opened it now. So, childhood trauma. In the event that a child finds overwhelmingly distressing or emotionally painful, often resulting in lasting mental and physical effects. You are 2 times more likely to develop depression, and you are 3 times more likely to develop anxiety disorders. The long term impacts of childhood trauma affects perception of reality. Your brain is constantly switched on to danger mode. You're always triggered. You have heightened emotions. You are stressed, trigger or fight and flight or freeze. You just can't respond. You have an inability to be emotional. You cannot relate to people properly. That's your antisocial personality disorders. That's your behavioral problems, mental health issues, and an inability, obviously, to bond with your children. It takes away a sense of safety, increased stress hormones flowing through your body, creates a sense of helplessness, and results in serious behavioral problems. Okay, so when we talk about the structure of the brain being impacted by stress, for children who are living under constant threat of danger, the initial trauma of a young child may go underground, but it will return to haunt us. So the prefrontal cortex, which is to do with thinking, becomes underactivated, meaning the child has an inability to concentrate and to learn. This is why children who have experienced things like sexual abuse, you often find they daydream a lot. This is part of the coping mechanism to deal with the thoughts they don't want to address. Sometimes during a period of sexual abuse or other kinds of trauma, whether it's a childhood trauma or an adult trauma, what you will find is you will black out. And what happens is something known as dissociation, meaning your conscious mind and your subconscious mind are like an iceberg. The top part of the iceberg that you can see is the conscious mind. This is short term memory, this is conscious thought processing, engaging in a task at hand. The subconscious mind is like the programs of your computer running in the background. They're always actively working, even when you cannot see them. So, when you go through a traumatic experience, the conscious mind cannot cope with what it's being stimulated with. It's too much to handle. And so the conscious mind shuts down, leaving the subconscious mind completely exposed. So, as a result, the personality can be shattered, the personality can be broken down, and this is where people get what used to be called multiple personality disorder. Now it's dissociative identity disorder, and it means that you may not consciously remember something, but when you see a certain stimulus, you suddenly get a reaction. Okay? So because the brain is under stress, the brain the brain's no longer consciously thinking. It's in a constant state of suppressing conscious thought, and as that becomes normal, over time that grows with you into adulthood where you struggle to concentrate and you struggle to learn. This is why I don't respect people who say things like black people have lower IQs or intelligence, because there are factors in the home and there are factors outside of the home that constantly keep black people under a constant state of stress. And as a result of that constant stress, this is why they struggle to perform. Okay? So the anterior cingulate cortex is emotional regulation center. How many times do we talk about emotional black men? Why is that? Again, if you're coming from households and environments where you're constantly under stress, is the police going to shoot me today? Am I going to get beats today? Am I going to eat today? Will I get a job? Will I succeed? Blah, 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 blah. You are going to have an inability to manage your emotions properly. And if you're growing up in a household with female nature as the lead, we know women tend to be more emotional, they tend to be more moody. So you're not only going to have the stress, you're also going to learn this behavior of dealing with situations in an emotional manner. And the amygdala fear center is overactive. So you have a difficulty feeling safe, secure, or trust. Black people have a big issue with trust because they have grown up in an environment where instability, or when we talked about before, the unstable or the dysfunctional home environment, it creates this feeling of constantly being uneasy, difficulty feeling safe, difficulty feeling calm, and difficulty sleeping. And they've actually found that when people are sleep deprived, they are more likely to make bad decisions. So if you have trouble sleeping, you're going to be irritable, you're more likely to make bad decisions, and as a result of the bad decisions, it's just a vicious cycle. So the common causes of childhood stress: child abuse, whether it's physical, emotional, or sexual, some type of violence, whether you witness it or you are a victim of it, neglect, witnessing or substance abuse, witnessing substance abuse or taking drugs, bullying in school, separation from loved one, mental illness, whether it's yours or somebody else's, or medical trauma, maybe an accident, if you are growing up in a war zone, or terrorism, or some type of grief. Okay. So I wonder if you guys can see that. So it is a complex situation. It is a complex situation. And as a result of the constant stress that a lot of people are under in the black community, this is why when you hear women say, it's not about the woman, it's about the man that left. It can't be, because the child is living in this environment. Um so let's go back to the article because I just want to run through a few more points. I don't think I'm gonna use all of them. Let me see if I can find the one I was reading earlier. Give me 1 second. So I know this is a heavy topic. It was when I saw this video, it really kind of interested me because we often hear this statistic that 80% of black women in the black community have been victims of sexual abuse before the age of 18, which means that a lot of black women out here who are broken are the ones raising the next generation of children. And a result of those unresolved issues, those problems are transferring from one generation to the next. Okay. So, the lifetime consequences of sexual abuse as a traumatic experience does not simply end because at some point in time the sexual abuse did. Rather, it is known to create specific long term problems that have the ability to disrupt women's lives. When women become mothers, their children can also experience specific kinds of problems stemming from their mother's trauma of childhood sexual abuse. For example, mothers sexually abused as children may experience more intense, prolonged postpartum depression than mothers who have not experienced this trauma. Women frequently experience other types of depression known as dysthymic, associated with childhood sexual abuse, which then becomes compounded by postpartum. So, dysthymic depression is actually a type of depression that is it's kind of like a consistent feeling of malaise. It's not the intense crushing depression that is the full blown um how can I say, like the crippling depression where you can't even get out of bed. It's just a persistent feeling that life can never ever be good for you. So it's called dysthymia, but persistent depressive disorder. Okay. This is a continuous long term form of depression. You may lose interest in normal daily activities, feel hopeless, there's a lack of productivity and low self esteem, and an overall feeling of inadequacy. These feelings last for years and may significantly interfere with your relationship, school, work, and daily life. If you have persistent depressive disorder, you may find it hard to be upbeat even on a happy occasion. You may be described as having a gloomy personality, constantly complaining, or incapable of having fun. Though persistent depressive disorder is not as severe as major depression, your current depressed mood may be mild, moderate, or severe. Because of the chronic nature of this disorder, coping with depression symptoms can be challenging, but a combination of talk therapy and medication can be effective. So the symptoms include loss of interest in daily activities, sadness, emptiness or feeling down, hopelessness, tiredness, a lack of energy, low self-esteem, self-criticism or feeling incapable, trouble concentrating, trouble making decisions, irritability or excess anger, decreased activity, effectiveness or productivity, avoidance of social activities, feeling of guilt and worry over the past, poor appetite or overeating, there's your weight problems, and sleep problem. In children, symptoms of persistent depressive disorder may include depressed mood and irritability. So, when you see this issue with the weight, it's not just about, aesthetics. There could be some kind of psychological problem that needs addressing in there, which is why there's constantly this lack of energy. A lot of these black women have low self-esteem. You have a lot of young men who have an inability to be productive. It's more than just you're born black and you don't want to work. You're born black and you just like to eat, or you're born black and you don't have an ability to control your emotions. There's often underlying trauma there which is not being addressed. Okay. So let's go back into my little article because this one is one of the shortest ones. Some of them are really wordy, and I'm sure nobody wants to sit here and watch that all day. Okay. Okay, so children can be affected by their mother's sexual abuse history that has gone unchecked. Emotional problems, including depression, anxiety, and eating disorders, along with chronic and multiple physical and health problems, can occur either daily or periodically and interfere with a woman's ability to availability to her children or cause adult responsibilities to be transferred onto children. because a mother is not able to function. A primary consequence of CSA is long-term disruption is the long-term disruption it can cause in relationships with the mother-child relationship as an example of a significant relationship that can be disrupted by the mother's childhood trauma. Family belief system and environment where a mother's sexual abuse occurred is also important to recognize as having a role in the disruption of the mother-child relationships because family belief, when you do the page like this, systems and environment provide a context for understanding both this trauma and the intergenerational effects of parenting. What does this mean? If you grow up in a dysfunctional household, you consider dysfunction normal. So this is why when you ask women, well, do you choose the father of your baby? What does a child need? What kind of things should you prepare before having a kid? What kind of things should you look for in a man? And the answer is It's because these people have never seen a functioning relationship. They associate dysfunction with a household. And as a result of not understanding what they need to do, they end up inflicting the same problems and traumas on their own children. So when the trauma of childhood sexual abuse was occurring, women as children learned certain beliefs and behaviors within this family context. Therefore, it is important to identify what maladaptive beliefs and behaviors learned from the family where the sexual abuse took place are influencing the mother's parenting today. CSA is a particularly insidious trauma to women since it's known to be consistently associated with the experience of multiple problems that vary in their disruption, seldom diminish on their own, and have the potential to reoccur across a woman's lifetime. So this is the big bit. Attachment theory. The relationship you have with your parents defines how you relate to other people. So if you have parents who are providing you with security, what often happens is you go on to believe that all people will treat you with respect and make you feel secure. If you have parents who are disruptive or who do not make you feel secure, you still learn how to have relationships with people, but the relationships you have with people will be insecure. So there are four main types of parenting out here. I hope this is the right one. Hey. So there are four main parenting styles. Yeah, sure. There are four main types of parenting. Make it really big so you guys can see. Okay, so at the top it talks about parental involvement. Parental involvement being high versus low. And to the left hand side it says discipline, whether the discipline is strong or weak. So when you have a parent who is very big on discipline and very big on being involved in your life, meaning they're firm but fair. They give, they are involved, they are interested in your life, but at the same time they set boundaries and perimeters and they offer discipline. This is known as authoritative parenting. So there's responsiveness. The child is at the center of the parenting. There is acceptance of the child. The child has a high warmth flexibility. I think that just means like there's a lot of love, communication, and things like that. It's democratic, meaning the child has a say. They feel involved in their own upbringing. There's give and there's take, and they feel supported. But when you have high discipline but low parental involvement, this is known as authoritarian, as in like a police officer. The parent is controlling, the parent is overbearing, the parent is the center of their own parenting. They care maybe more about how people perceive them as a parent than making their own children happy. They often reject the children when the children do not do what they want because they're very strong in the discipline area, meaning they're very demanding. But because they're unsupportive, there is low warmth. There's no love. This is going to stifle a child's emotional development because at the end of the day, You learn how to treat people by the way you're treated. So if you have cold and emotionally unavailable parents, which is something that can happen as a result of your parent being a victim of sexual abuse or other forms of trauma, that is how they are going to then go on to treat you. And then it says here, obedience and punishment. If you are somebody who doesn't toe the line, you are expected to be obedient without a reward, and punishment is often the way that you are forced to come back into line. The other side of the situation is, even with parents who have been victims of sexual abuse, they often feel powerless. And so as a result, they often do not discipline because they don't want to either make the child feel unhappy or because they don't feel equipped to discipline. And as a result of the fact that they offer weak discipline, what happens is what is known as either permissive or negligent parenting. So the parents have low control. The children are wrecking the house, they're pulling everything down, they're swearing at the parent, they're hitting the parents. The child, this is when you see children who are spoiled, where the parent doesn't want to rock the boat, so they basically give the child everything that they want. There's a high warmth leniency, meaning they don't ever correct the child, and as a result the children are left directionless because they are the ones running the show. And then obviously where you have weak discipline coupled with low support, you have neglect. Neglect is withholding something that the child needs. Children do need discipline. So when you are sitting in front of the TV, or you give the child a game or plonk them in front of the TV and just let them get on with it, this is a negligent form of parenting because you're withholding structure and you're withholding praise, rewards, direction from that child. So a neglectful parent is uninvolved, they're indifferent, meaning either way, whatever you do, they're not really bothered. There's sometimes maybe rejecting. If you bring something, they're not really interested. They're passive. They're often not present. Again, why do we have children who are raised in single mother households struggling? Because there's no parent there. A lot of the time, they're latchkey kids being raised by the TV. They come and go as they please with no guidance. And so, because they're not being emotionally invested in, they end up growing up to be distant adults. So this is the four types of parenting styles. And we can see that in situations where there's no parents around, this is, apart from the first one, authoritative, the top left one, the other three are not ideal parenting styles because one is too overbearing and the other two are too directionless. Okay, so as we can see, this is a significant problem. It's all well and good to say 80% of black women are abused, but we've always got to go back to how did you get to be in that situation where you were abused? Because if you are a minor, you are under the jurisdiction of your parent. And so it's important for us to talk to other women about how did the children get in that situation where they could be preyed upon. Okay, so let me see, can I make this slightly bigger so it's easier for you guys to read? We're nearly there because I just wanted to use this. I'll put the link to the video in the description so you guys can go and take your time and watch it without my big mouth over the top. So attachment theory. Attachment theory is different to parenting style, but they're closely related because if you have an authoritative parent who is listening to you, they're supportive, they're going to provide a secure attachment, which you will then go on to have healthy relationships with other people. So attachment theory is slightly different, but it's related to parenting style because the relationship that you have as a child with your parents is how you believe all relationships will be. So this is why, again, when you have men saying we don't really want to date women who have bad relationships with their fathers, it's because if you don't have a decent attachment to a male figure, you're not going to know how to treat a man. You're not going to appreciate him. And chances are you will find men even frightening because you just don't understand them. Okay, so the importance of the parent-child relationship is both well known and intuitively accepted across cultures. Attachment theory, as proposed by Bowlby in 1969, has grown in interest during recent years since it provides a basis to help explain how a healthy parent-child attachment translates into healthy adult relationships. The majority of this research applied to attachment theory has been on the observation of the mother-child relationship, with the focus of study on the consequences to the infant's development when the mother's attachment to her child is disrupted for a period of time or does not occur at all. So this is neglect, emotional neglect. The view from this research is that disruption to the maternal attachment is traumatic to the child and impacts his or her development neurologically, i.e., the structure of the brain, emotionally, affect regulation or emotional relationships or affection levels, and socially, their ability to interact with others, resulting in long term problems to a child's lifetime. Attachment theory can also be applied to understanding the consequences that past sexual abuse trauma can have on relationships, and in particular, the mother child relationship. Healthy attachment by the mother to her child is viewed as of the internal female foundations that enables a mother to nurture her child's development and protect her child from potential harm. The maternal attachment is shown by the mother through her parenting of her child. Women who are observed with their children as nurturing, attuned to their child's needs, encouraging appropriate development, emotionally available, physically healthy, and mentally alert are viewed as positive and healthy mothers capable of meeting the needs of the developing child from infancy. That was a long list. But how many times have you heard these things? Oh, please, no. How many times have you heard these things? My mother was cold. My mother was hard. My mother was always beating me. You do as I say, not what I do. Or, my mother didn't ever tell me she loved me. She didn't encourage me. When I had things going on, she didn't show up to my meeting. I saw something on Instagram the other day where it was a post. This teacher went to lunch with this boy who graduated and none of his family came. The reason why he took the boy to lunch is because when everybody was graduating and celebrating with their families, he saw this boy standing on his own. And I said, a lot of black women will say, why don't black men perform? And I got a little bit of pushback, like, what do you mean it doesn't really matter? No one came to my graduation. But it matters to a child at that time. It impacts their self esteem, it impacts their sense of self worth. Because if the people who are supposed to care for you do not even bother to show up to things like your graduation, your presentations, they're not looking over your homework, that impacts how you view yourself. Because how you view yourself as a child is predicated on how you're treated by the people who are supposed to care about you the most. Encouraging appropriate development. So when you have WAP culture, when you have children with the cell phone, when you have children on the internet and they're being exposed to a lot of things, this is a form of sexual abuse because they are being exposed to sexual content which is inappropriate for their age and their cognitive development. Children who experience sexual stimulus, whether it's abuse or getting into relationships earlier, it damages them emotionally and psychologically, which makes it harder for them to trust later on. That's why I always say, for me, there is a concerted effort to over sexualize black people, especially young black people, because they know how it derails you later on in life. Your inability to trust as a woman is going to stop you from being able to form stable, functioning families. And that, we talked about yesterday the concept of the factory or the mill. This is part of the systematic attack on black people, over sexualizing them, keeping black women and children unprotected so the cycle of abuse can continue. Okay, so if you are physically healthy, how many black people are physically unhealthy? Mentally alert. These are the kind of mothers who are seen to have a positive impact on children. And no matter how much people want to say, well, it's the fatherlessness, in the first 7 to 10 years, maybe 9 years, that child is very attached to the mother. It's only after about the age of 7, 8, maybe 9, the child really needs that strong father figure, because the child is going to need milk, they're going to need nurturing, they need to be the center of attention. And this is the kind of thing that a mother is going to provide, in theory, if she's healthy. So, is the father's input from childhood necessary and relevant? Of course. But if the mother is dysfunctional, if she has mental health problems and unresolved issues, that is going to have a bigger impact on the child than the absence of the father. Can you go up, please? Thank you. So we're near to the end now, guys. Family risk factors. Childhood sexual abuse is frequently perpetrated by either a family member or someone the family knows and trusts. Similar to other types of child maltreatment, it takes place within the context of the family environment. The internal belief system of the family and external family behavior coexist within a family environment and interact to both create and maintain risk factors for sexual abuse of children. Duncan proposed that it is the established maladaptive belief system in families where sexual abuse occurs that both supports and continues the maltreatment of children. So basically, what they're saying is where one person doesn't understand or drops the ball, they don't see, as we saw in the video, Iyanla asked the woman, why didn't you realize this man is abusing you? He's even hitting you. And she's like, I didn't see it. I didn't see it. Because for her, that's normal. She came from a negligent, abusive background where she was unguarded, unprotected, she was preyed upon, and her mother was medicating with alcohol. So when she had her own children, she didn't have the awareness, the wherewithal to think, I need to be protective. Even if she felt like, I don't want my children to be abused, she felt powerless to stop it. And again, you see, this is why people say, single mothers are easy prey, because if they come from a background of dysfunction, there's just certain signs and red flags they won't see. And that means you are open to be preyed upon, and so are the children. So, according to Duncan, intergenerational aspects of sexual abuse include not only a risk of trauma of sexual abuse being passed forward into the next generation, but also the belief system that sustains it. Women as children are vulnerable to acquiring, in some part, the maladaptive beliefs existing within their family that are learned and reinforced through social and cognitive conditioning, which in turn shapes their thoughts, belief, and behavior. The perpetrators of sexual abuse also influences a woman's thoughts and beliefs, especially those that defines how she views herself, her children. I don't know why you make an article like this. Herself in relation to the trauma of sexual abuse. So what's that? Manipulation, things like, it's your fault, you led me on, I thought you liked it. There's obviously guilt and shame because you're being touched in a way that is going to naturally stimulate you. You're designed as a sexual being. So when somebody touches you inappropriately, there's a conflict because, on the one hand, this person is breaching trust and breaking boundaries. This is why people who are victims of sexual abuse often go on to self victimize themselves sexually. This is why the mother said, I was sleeping with multiple men. I don't know who the father of at least one of my children is. And, it's partly because I grew up without a father and I don't know who my father is. I was sexually abused, which caused, in this case, the mother to become hypersexual. And as a result of her hypersexual behavior, she then went on to fall pregnant, probably at a young age. I think she was a teenage mom when she had her first child. And as a result of the fact that she was inexperienced, immature, psychologically damaged, she now put her children in a position to be also victimized. Okay, so hypersexual behavior, and also often victims of sexual abuse struggle with boundaries. The person, 9 times out of 10, the person who abuses somebody sexually is somebody you know and who you trust. And if you as a child are looking up to an adult who doesn't know how to behave appropriately, you learn how to not behave appropriately either. People who are victims of childhood abuse often struggle with boundaries because they have been violated and they have been made to feel powerless. They couldn't resist that perpetrator. And so, even in adulthood, they carry this feeling of hopelessness and powerlessness into adulthood, which is why sometimes they overlook or they're not able to tackle abuse even in their adult life to the point where they can't even protect their children. When internalized, these maladaptive beliefs learned from the family and perpetrators will continue to impact the woman's view of how to relate in future relationships and will, in some manner, define and guide her maternal attitudes and parenting behavior with her children. The family environment where sexual abuse occurred to the woman is described as a lacking adult supervision, harsh and punitive, inconsistent, desensitized to stress, chaos, and crisis. A review by Polonsny and Foley of reported family characteristics where sexual abuse occurred identified those families as with less cohesiveness, less adaptable, and more conflictual and authoritarian. So there's that parenting style. Low support, but a lot of discipline. Low levels of love, but high demands. Family characteristics seem to cluster into behaviors exhibiting higher levels of role and boundary confusion, more rigid control over children while exhibiting permissive and authoritarian styles of parenting, less cohesiveness and lack of adaptability, vacillation between emotional discontrol and an absence of emotional expression. So, where the parents have suppressed their feelings, they have high demands, but they are unable to support their children's needs. And when mothers come from these kind of family environments, they report having difficulties that include an inability to speak up when children are being mistreated, not trusting or overestimating their ability to parent effectively. And this is one of the reasons why these women will bring men into the home and they say, you often hear, I'm looking for a father for my child. Part of that is because they do not trust their ability to be a parent. And so they're looking for a man to come in, but they don't understand that their poor judgment is going to open the door to a predator. A lot of people remember the story of the little boy that was killed by the mother's boyfriend. I can't even remember. I have to look for it now. Where the mother brought in a boyfriend to the house. The boy was about 8 years old. He comes into, I believe, the lounge and catches the mother's daughter and boyfriend about to assault his younger sister on the couch. When the boy tried to fight the boyfriend off, the boyfriend bludgeoned the daughter, the son, and the mother with a hammer, and the boy died. Now, a Google search would have brought up that this man had a string of criminal convictions for child sex abuse. But because the mother was so desperate to get somebody in the house, she didn't even do a background check, and as a result, her son died. And this is why men are critical of women who have children, and there's a different or a distinction or a differentiation made between a woman who has children out of wedlock versus a single mother. Okay, so where am I? We're nearly there because you can see where this is going. You can see how the story with this lady's panned out and how it all comes together. This is not just simply about childhood sexual abuse. It's about all kinds of trauma, how it impacts a child. But obviously, we're talking about Black people because if you're a Black person living in the West, you are going to often experience all kinds of other types of discrimination and hindrances that are going to also further compound the issue. So they have an inability to trust their parenting effectiveness, less ability to show love, affection, warmth, and genuine feelings towards their children. So now, as a result of their unresolved issues, the children experience emotional neglect, feelings, or with specific children. And I think this is where it says that sometimes these women struggle to relate to their sons because they have an issue. Because unfortunately, most perpetrators of sexual abuse, whether the victim is male or female, is men. Sometimes these women struggle to actually bond with their sons because they have an issue with males in general. Excessive anger and hostility towards children, inappropriate expectations of autonomy for their children, i.e., you're big enough, you can do it for yourself, make your own dinner, blah, 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 blah. Less acceptance of their children and experiences of health problems that interfere with being available for their children on a consistent basis. A tendency to use families' denial system also creates the risk of victimization to children by perpetrators within the family and can reinforce a woman's inability to identify when her parenting is problematic or harmful to her children. Just scroll back up. Where are we? Problem to her children. Okay, so here is disruption of parenting. So if you are a woman or even maybe a man who's been a victim of childhood sexual abuse, but this one is obviously the mother, confusion about characteristic of healthy families. What do you want for your children? I don't know. Where are they going to school? I don't know. Do you pick the father of your baby? No. What do children need? Food and somewhere to live. Anything else? I don't know. Mothers sexually abused as children report confusion about healthy family characteristics. This confusion creates interpersonal conflict, which increases internal stress for the mother and external stress for the child. The context for this confusion occurred within the family environment and belief system where the mother was abused. It then transfers to the mother's adult life, where it influences her thoughts, feelings, beliefs, and behaviors as a mother. Feelings due to long-term consequences of trauma that have not been healed. Women are the major consumers of healthcare, both for themselves and children. It is within the access of the healthcare community that victims of CSA can start healing. I mean, that was the whole point of this article, that it was saying that you really need to address the pain of the mothers so that they can also go on to be healthy parents. Okay, so I know that this is quite a heavy topic, but it's a video that I've wanted to do for a while, and we have to talk about this because I get really irritated hearing this statistic about how many children are abused and how many girls are abused, because this is a generational problem, and until we address the decisions that women are making, we cannot move the community forward in any kind of healthy way. And it just starts with one person at a time. It starts with one person at a time. You can't save everyone, you can't save the whole community, but if each of us tells one person this is what's going on, it can make a difference. And obviously the traumas that we go through are not just sexual. All trauma has an impact on how we develop as people, whether it's physical abuse, sexual abuse, emotional abuse, or neglect, or living in a dysfunctional environment. So remember, that's what the word ACEs stands for: adverse childhood experiences, and they're traumatic events that occur during childhood. They can include violence, abuse, and growing up in a family where there's mental or health problems. Toxic stress from ACE can change the brain development and affect how the body responds to stress. ACEs are linked to chronic problems, mental health issues, substance misuse, and also even things like pain. A lot of what people have chronic pain, chronic fatigue. That's what could be the result. Trauma during childhood that has caused neurological damage in the brain or nerve damage in the body. 61% of adults had at least one ACE, 16% had four or more. Females are severely are females and several racial ethnic minority groups were at greater risk of experiencing four or more ACEs. Many people Many people do not realize that exposure to ACEs is associated with an increased risk of health problems across your lifespan. So, childhood trauma can actually change not just your physical health, your mental health, but your physical health. And make you rubbish with computers. So, preventing ACEs can help children and adults thrive. Creating a stable home environment reduces the risk of depression, asthma, cancer, what black people love, diabetes in adulthood. You are less likely to drink. You are less likely to smoke. You are likely to do better at school, do better at work. Stopping ACEs from being passed from one generation to another is what is going to help black people do better. Let's see. Health conditions, depressive disorders. As we talked about earlier, a lot of people don't necessarily have the crushing depression, but they have dysthymia or consistent low level depression in the background. They're more likely to engage in risky behaviors, and that includes risky sexual behaviors, and they're more likely to be unemployed or less employable. So I think that is pretty much it. I'm not going to bore you anymore. Yeah. There were some other articles, but I think by now we get we get the picture. Childhood trauma, regardless of the type of trauma, it severely impacts. Yeah, complex is good. Complex is really good. Um, Childhood trauma, it has long-standing effects on how we develop as a group, and so I'm not against mentoring. I'm not against stepdads because I find that these are measures that are more preventative. Like they're trying to cure a problem that maybe shouldn't have occurred in the first place. And so, as much as there are good things about mentoring, it shouldn't be an assumed crutch. Okay. So I think this is the last one, and this is what I'm going to end with. Impact of childhood trauma. And as we can see, childhood trauma affects the entire being. Okay. Should I hope, let me know, can you see? I hope you can see. Okay. Childhood trauma, neglect, abuse, dysfunctional household. How does it impact a child's ability to think, their cognition? Impaired readiness to learn, difficulty with problem solving, they take longer to start talking, problems with concentration, poor academic achievement. Physical health, sleep disorders, eating disorders, including overeating, poor immune system functioning, cardiovascular disease, that's your heart disease, and life expectancy is lowered. When you have four ACEs or more, your life expectancy is cut by 20 years. If the average person lives to 80, if you've had at least four of those ACEs during your childhood, chances you won't live past 60. So when you hear, oh, a lot of these black men are dead or in prison, maybe now you know why. Emotions, difficulty controlling your emotions, trouble recognizing emotions. You're so emotionally unavailable, you don't really know what you feel. That's antisocial behaviors like sociopathy, borderline personality disorder, psychopathy. Limited coping skills, increased sensitivity to stress, shame and guilt, excessive worry or hopelessness, and feeling helpless or lack of efficiency. Let's go to the left hand side. Brain development. Got to make this one big for all those people who like to say black people are just less intelligent. Being under constant stress as a child will cause your brain to be smaller because the stress that you are under is actually stopping brain cells from developing. Less efficient at processing. Your IQ is lowered, but not because you're stupid, it's because your brain has not been able to develop properly due to the stress. Impaired stress response. You have impaired stress response because when you are somebody who's grown up under consistent stress, your brain is always looking for dangers. You're not able to concentrate because your brain is always in fight or flight mode. And also changes in gene expression. When young children are under excessive amounts of stress, actually genes that code for illnesses can be switched on, or the ability to fight illness gets switched off. This is why children who have traumatic upbringings often develop other health problems later on in adulthood. Behavior problems, poor self regulation, no self control, social withdrawal, isolated, antisocial, introverted, aggression. You are unable to express yourself, it manifests as anger. Poor impulse control, you don't know how to say no, you don't know how to have appropriate boundaries, you can't control your spending. Risk taking, again, that's a boundaries issue. You don't understand the risk, so you just do whatever because it gets you feeling some type of way. Sexually acting out, you can become hypersexual, asexual, meaning you don't want sex, or you can be overly sexual. And there's an increased risk of teen pregnancy, single parenthood, and drink and drug misuse. Mental health problems, depression, anxiety, low self esteem, and a negative self image, PTSD, and if it's really severe, increased risk of suicidal thoughts and tendencies. And lastly, relationships. You cannot attach to people, you cannot have healthy relationships, you have a poor understanding of social interactions, you have a difficulty making friends, you have a difficulty being in romantic relationships, and you are likely to perpetuate the cycle of abuse. So, on that positive note, Saturday is a couple of days away. But yeah, I say this jokingly, but that's where we're at. This is where we're at. So this video, I hope it's been helpful. I know that it's not a particularly pleasant topic to talk about, but it's a topic that we have to address. And when you get into these debates, don't go back and forth with these people who try to gaslight you that somehow it's not the woman's fault. Just ask them certain questions and make them actually expose themselves. And you can obviously use this video as an example of what we are talking about. How the way a mother is not groomed to be a wife and a mother because she's let down in her own upbringing can jeopardize her own children's future abuse and future. Let me know what you think in the comment section. Thanks so much for all of you guys who came through. Like, share the video with somebody who needs to see it. Subscribe if you haven't subscribed, and I will catch you in the next one. Peace.